Hello, Lenawee County. I have an awesome interview in store for you. I sat down with Josh Randall from the 127 yard sale, the world's longest yard sale that has its northernmost point here in Addison, Michigan. It goes from here in Michigan all the way down south to Alabama, but don't let me tell you about it. I'll let Josh explain everything. Check it out. Okay, so for folks who aren't aware of this event, can you tell us a little bit about the 127 yard sale?
So this is a huge event that's been going on now for 39 years. This will be the 39th one. It started in 1987. The idea was from some officials in Jamestown, Tennessee. And their idea was to try to drop traffic off kind of the major interstates into the more rural locations that people wouldn't necessarily think to visit. And so they came up with this idea. They reached out the first year to officials in Kentucky as well. So the event took place in Kentucky and Tennessee the first year. And it gets its name from highway or Route 127. That's why it's called the 127 yard sale. And it's also known as the world's longest yard sale. It's 690 miles currently. And it's a 4-day event, and it goes through 6 states. The northernmost point is up there in Michigan and Addison. Then it goes all the way through Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. It kind of clips the northwestern corner of Georgia, and then it goes into Alabama that ends in Gadsden, Alabama.
Yeah, the northernmost tip being Addison. I guess we could claim to be the beginning, but Gadsden could also say, well, if you're going north, we're the start. But
yeah, we hear a lot of that. A little bit of rivalry, yeah, kind of comes about.
How did Addison becoming the northernmost tip of this come to be?
So over the years, like I said, it started in Kentucky and Tennessee, and over the years, they got requests to extend it. And initially, it went into Georgia and Alabama down to Gadsden, and then later on, I think it was around 2006, it got extended all the way through Ohio, and then in 2010 it extended up into Michigan, into Hudson, Michigan, which is just a little bit north of Addison, and then in 2012 it was extended up into Addison. And so usually the way that worked out is the officials in those locations saw what was going on and wanted to be a part of it and would reach out, and so then that's how it would get extended up into those areas.
Also, it hasn't even been that long since Addison was added to the list for this particular route.
It's kind of the youngest part of the route, and so it's still growing, and it's doing really well though. And it's only about 25 miles, so it's a great place to start and see some really nice countryside, and then you can just keep going south and head into Ohio and keep going on the route.
Nice. Well, so do you remember your first 127 yard sale and what stood out to you?
I mean, to be honest, just kind of the sheer magnitude of it. It's a lot bigger and more. There's way more vendors and just more going on than people, I think, really realize. They're thinking sort of your typical neighborhood yard sale where there'll be a house here and a house there. But once you get on the route, you just see tons and tons of yard sales. You see what we call major vendor stops, which are locations where there's 25 or more vendors or sellers all kind of grouped together. And so, you realize pretty quickly, first of all, you're not going to be able to go as far as you think you are in a day, and just how big it is and how much stuff there is. It's really just amazing what the scale is of this event.
So when these events kick off, what's the energy like around these different towns? Because I know there's 65 different towns that you guys run through.
I mean, it's really just one of those things that kind of draws you in, and people just love this event. They come back year after year. It's one of those things I always tell people you really have to experience. Like I was just saying, once you get on the route and you see how many vendors there are and just how big it is, but meeting people and there's people from all over the country that come to this and really interesting people in the South and different locations that you may not be from. And so it's one of those things that's kind of like going to a theme park or, a concert or something. There's just something about it that kind of draws you in. So it's really cool.
So this is something that people tend to plan their entire summers around, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, we actually run a group that has about 89,000 members right now on Facebook. And so we see that every year, people talking about, they've been doing this for some of them for decades. And they plan, their summer vacation around it. A lot of times they'll drive from somewhere and, they'll hit other stops on the way, go to attractions and things like that. But this is the thing that they love to do every summer, and they just keep coming back.
Well, I'm guessing then that there's probably some people who do some traditions with this. Have you seen any, wild road trip setups or RVs that have been decorated in fun ways or anything like that?
Yeah, so like it's kind of become a thing for people to do, different things to draw attention to the either to like vendors to their sale or just people who are on their app. So like you get some of this stuff where like you'll have groups, like maybe a group of women, sisters or friends or whatever, who are going on the trip, and they'll kind of decorate their vehicle. They'll put that kind of paint stuff on there and stuff like that. I've seen before, like there was a guy driving around, he had a truck, and there was like this pretty much life-size giraffe standing in the bed of the truck. He must have gotten it from like a zoo or some attraction in the past or something, and he had it mounted in there so you could just drive around with it sticking up, and of course that draws a ton of attention. But you see a lot of stuff kind of like that. One time it was actually down in Alabama, there was a guy who had this really cool setup. I think it was an RV that he had kind of converted, and the back end of it sort of had like almost like a storefront where he could sit in there, and there was like a counter, like like you go to pay for your items in the store. But he had so much stuff. He was selling like birdhouses and all kinds of stuff, and he had music playing. And there was so much stuff on there. When I first walked up to it, I didn't even see that he was in there because there's just so much stuff all around it. But he's just sitting in there and he's like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, didn't even see you there." But yeah, you see all kinds of crazy stuff to draw attention.
What's probably some of the craziest stuff you've seen?
The craziest stuff. I mean, there in Ohio, there's a major vendor stop right there in Addison. It's on the corner, basically on the corner of 127 and Main Street in Addison. And there's a really cool location with a bunch of vendors there. And the guy who runs it, he's a character. Anybody who's in the area should go meet him and talk to him. But he had talked to somebody who had these life-size, well, not quite life-size, but giant dinosaurs and like bear kind of statues. They used to be at I guess it was like an amusement park up there somewhere in that area called Prehistoric Forest. Some people might have heard of that.
I've heard of that, yes.
Yeah, no, he had those things from the past, and he brought him to his location, had them out by the road. They were a cool photo op and could draw in a lot of attention. But yeah, you see a lot of things like that where people will set up stuff to have photo ops, of course, to draw eyeballs off the road, get them to stop at their location and hopefully spend some money.
That is that's a cool way to get people in too, because that's not, obviously the decorating an RV is a really cool way to do it, but like having something that was like a landmark or something on a road trip kind of documentary, as you're like, hey, look, I have this right here. That's a pretty cool, yeah.
It draws in the media too, because there's a lot of media that will travel the event. So I mean, that's a good way to get them to stop and do it. Include you in their story. So
it would have got my attention, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what is the furthest that someone has traveled to take part in this?
So one that sticks out in my mind is a guy who came over here from France, and
wow.
I found out he actually has a business where he buys like American stuff that French people are interested in collecting. Sometimes that's like license plates, and I don't know what all else he gets. And imagine it's not a lot of really big things because he's got to get them back to France.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we get some, we get some media sometimes from other countries. Of course, Canada would be probably the most likely location that people are coming from outside of the U.S. But definitely all over the country, we get lots of people coming.
That's cool. The France aspect, I like that. Even overseas, you guys are getting attention for that. That's pretty cool. So if someone has never been to this, what would be, some of the best spots in your mind along the entire route that they could check out or hit?
So along the entire route, I mean, I mentioned earlier, we have what we call major vendor stops, and these are locations that we've, put a list together, and they have 25 or more vendors all grouped together. And so some of those can be regular yard sales, people that live in the area but aren't really close enough to the route to have a yard sale. And then you have people that bring certain types of items, like Pyrex is kind of a big collectible item, cast iron, antique furniture. So you have those types of people who've kind of curated stuff, but they all group together. And the smallest of those would be, like I said, they start at 25 vendors. Some of them go up to like 300. Not too far south of Addison, in the northern part of Ohio, there's a town called Van Wert, and they let vendors set up at their fairgrounds. And they have something around like 300 vendors. And this year, actually, I'll mention that we have our presenting sponsors, Rust-Oleum. They're going to be on location in Van Wert. They're going to be doing like DIY demonstrations, kind of how to take your 127 yard sale finds and repurpose them. And they're going to be doing giveaways and stuff. So that's a really cool location. You could probably spend at least a half a day just there if you wanted to, maybe longer, depending on how thoroughly you want to go through all the stops. But there's lots of those all along the route. You can find those on the website at 127yardsale.com, and you can see all the major vendor stops. Those are cool places. what I call kind of the mecca of the yard sale. It's right where I-40 crosses through Tennessee and it intersects with 127. And you have a town called Crossville, Tennessee,
Okay.
right there. And just north of there, not too far north of there, is Jamestown, which I mentioned is where the whole event originated. So that, because of it being a starting point, has always been a very high participation, highly trafficked area. So anybody who lives near there or just wants to go down there and check it out, I mean, again, you could spend probably a day or two just in that area because there's just so many sellers there set up. So those are really cool.
Very cool. Well, we've covered a lot, and so one of the things I like to do towards the end of interviews I do is allow you to give just one statement of something that maybe you wanted to talk about, or maybe something that you want to have folks know about this event that we haven't covered, that we haven't talked about. Is there anything about the 127 yard sale that would be significant to you in that way?
So first, if anybody wants to get more information, go to 127yardsale.com. There's tons of information on there to help you plan your trip and find out. There's an FAQ page, which has all the questions that people ask on the group over and over and over. But you can get information there. You can also find us at 127 Yard Sale on all the social media platforms. But two things I would mention for people to know. One, it's a rain or shine event, so don't worry about that. I mean, plan for it. You might want to bring an umbrella, poncho, those kinds of things. But vendors are not going to, close up and leave. They might have to cover their stuff until it stops raining, but they're aware of that and they're ready and they plan for that. Most of them have tents and those kinds of things. So don't worry about it getting canceled. It never gets canceled. It goes on rain or shine. And number two, we encourage people, don't try to go too far, travel too far in a day. We recommend about 50 to 70 miles a day. If you want to book hotels ahead of time, you can. We're getting a little close now, so it might be more difficult. But if you're willing to travel off the route a little ways, 20, 30 miles or so, you can usually find something. And honestly, the prices will be better because right on the route, supply and demand dictates higher prices. But so just get on the route. You'll see the yard sales. You really don't need to know where they all are. Some people want a list or whatever. We do have a list of the major vendor stops, and you can actually print out a map that kind of shows the different states, and it shows the route and the major towns and those vendor stops. But don't worry about all the other sales, the yard sales at people's houses and everything. You're going to see those. You're going to see signs possibly pointing you off the side of the road. So just get on the route dry. You're not going to miss anything. Just have fun and experience this awesome event.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sitting down with me, Josh. This was a great thing to be able to discover and be able to promote for you guys.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
That was Josh Randall with the 127 yard sale. I hope you guys enjoyed that interview. And if you're looking for something fun to do, check out that yard sale. It starts up here in Addison, Michigan, and runs all the way down to Alabama. Might be a fun little summer road trip. A little last minute at this point, but spontaneity is the spice of life, they say. Have a good one, Lenawee.